that's now what I think is most important, is that these lineages, classical Asian medicine, has come to the West in the form of acupuncture, in the form of, trendy herbal products, and Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine or panchakarma, these types of things, luxury spa treatments, these kind of things. But it's very much out of context. The way that these things used to be used was inseparable from medical practice and ceremony and ritual and contemplative practices. So this is the doorway, the opportunity that we have is to really bring back the sacredness, the reverence, the spiritual dimensions to plant medicine.
You're listening to the LabAroma podcast with me, your host, Colleen Quinn. At LabAroma, we believe the secret to truly effective and therapeutic plant medicine is by understanding our plant science and backing it up with evidence. And this week I sit down and have a fascinating conversation about the history, the present state and the future of plant medicine and herbalism. David Crowe graduated from the American College of Traditional Chinese Medicine in 1984. He is a Californian state licensed acupuncturist and nationally certified by the National Commission for the Certification of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. David has been a clinician, consultant, researcher and educator for over 35 years and still does all of those things. As an educator, he has taught extensively for over 2 decades in the US and Canada, online and internationally. David, as you will hear, he has travelled extensively to study traditional medicinal systems, including several years where he spent time in Nepal and India studying Tibetan and Ayurvedic medicine. He is the author of 4 books, including In Search of the Medicine Buddha, about his time with traditional doctors in the Himalayas, and one of his other books is Sacred Smoke, about the ethnobotanical research in Ecuador. He's also the founder and owner of Floracopeia, which is a company devoted to supporting sustainable ecological agriculture through the production of essential oils. David's knowledge, passion and commitment to this world is not only very evident and passionate, it's what we need, especially today in this world. Jump in and let David educate you. David, thank you so much for doing the podcast with us. I can't wait to jump into this conversation. So can we start at the start? How did you get into the world? I love how you call the botanicals and the plants botanical treasures. And I'm assuming when you call them that, you're talking about all of those treasures, including the essential oils, the carrier oils, all of the herbs and botanicals. How did you find your way into this world?
Well, I think you're referring to our tagline at Floracopeia, Aromatic Treasures, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's because so many of the aromatics are actually treasures. And my definition of what makes something a treasure, well, really, I mean, it's a bigger question about why are plants important. And, I also frequently say that, plant medicine is sacred. And so sacredness, preciousness, and being treasured are all related feelings about plants, observations about their value in our lives and in nature. But when it came to this particular term for specific essential oils or incense compounds from plants like resins and woods, then the word treasure implies that, first of all, it's really valuable economically. And a lot of these things are, as you know. I mean, some essential oils are mass produced. They're not really that unusual, hard to find, easily available on the market, and so forth. But some things are in really limited supplies. And so that makes them a treasure just in terms of their availability. And because of that, the price makes them a treasure also. So there are different classifications of essential oils economically. And that breaks down into a few major factors. One is the availability of the plant and the demand for its oil or for the plant itself in herbal medicine. And when it comes to distillation, it also has a lot to do with the yield of the oil from the plant. And so if you take all these factors and put them together, what you see are that you can have a plant that is abundantly available, and it is easy to get a high yield of the oil from it, and it regenerates quickly. It's not endangered. And something like eucalyptus oil would be in that category because you're distilling leaves and they're easily available all over the world. And so therefore, is it not a treasure? Well, no, eucalyptus oil is a treasure medically, but it's just not expensive, that's all. And it's not hard to get and it's not rare. But on the other hand, if you take something like sandalwood or agar wood, even more so, these trees are endangered in some parts of the world, agar wood especially, and they take a long time to regenerate. You can't just plant them and they come up the same year and you can harvest it. It takes 50 years to get the oil. And so there's a long regenerative time, and that influences how much oil you can get every year. And then there was also, for many of the rare treasures like this, there's also a huge demand all the time. And so the huge demand and the low yield and the slow regeneration time and the endangered status adds up to having things that are so valuable economically and so rare and precious botanically that we could call them real treasures. And if they are in that category, which a lot of things are, frankincense and myrrh are in that category now, and rose oil, a lot of the exotic flowers, so many things are in that category now, that it raises a question about, well, how should we relate to them?
Yeah.
And we should relate to natural resources with respect, to all natural resources. We should be relating to our food plants with reverence because we may not have them in a few years. Yeah. We should be relating to the animals with reverence and respect. And so the idea then that something is a treasure is partly based on this economic status, but it's also based on botanical status, ecological, environmental status, and so forth. And really, it's just a way of remembering that something is really precious. But I apply that kind of thinking and encourage people to think about all natural resources, all plants, all animals, all the elements, water, earth, sunlight, everything, the human body, everything is an expression of divinity, really. And we need to use natural medicine not just for treating our symptoms. We need to use more and more as a doorway into a kind of perspective about the sacredness and the value and divinity that is in all the plants. And so with these aromatic treasures, that gives us a really good opportunity to do that, because instead of just using things indiscriminately, like with frankincense oil, the question has come, why are you selling these endangered species? Products from these endangered species. And there's two answers. One is that it is being sourced very carefully with a lot of discrimination to support people who are taking care of it in a sustainable way. Because if you simply abandon all commerce of endangered species, then you're not going to give any economic support to people who are trying to take care of them. So that's what we're trying to do, is be very discriminating and careful and support the people that will have them have these species in the future because they're doing it sustainably. That's the first answer. But the second answer is that when we are talking about things that are very precious and harder to come by, we should not treat them as just consumer commodities. We should use them with reverence. We should use them in a way that connects us to those plants. In other words, we should use them with mindfulness and prayer and contemplation, and using them as an opportunity to connect with the intelligence of those plants, because they may not be here much longer. And so how should we relate to them? That's the long answer. Why are they treasures? But everything's in that category now.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you found over the years, David, that there's more and more awareness of this, the need for respect and need for sustainability with our plants becoming more mainstream, or do you feel you're still spending a lot of time having to educate on this as a core principle?
Well, no, it's very mainstream now. Obviously, more and more businesses are moving in that direction, but there's a difference between claiming to be a green business and actually being a green business, you see, because on the ground, it's really difficult, to do these kind of things. And there's really, you see, it's a different model of thinking altogether, because one is based on economics and the other is based on ethics.
Yeah.
And if one is based on ethics, then what you're talking about is that you have to redistribute the profits and you have to engage everybody. It's the opposite of globalization, where power and resources and wealth get concentrated in this upward pyramid to a few people at the top. And that's what's destroying the world. And to antidote that and to bring business back into a healthy relationship with nature, then what it means is that it has to address inequality. It has to address racism. It has to address ecological, political issues. It has to address the role of women. It has to address all of these kind of things, because what it comes down to is that the people on the ground who are doing the work have to get compensated in a sustainable way. So we can take frankincense, for example, as an example of the imbalance here. Most frankincense on the world market is coming from exploitative sources, and frankincense is very hard to regenerate. It takes a long time. Desert tree, and really the only way that there can be a long-term sustainability of frankincense is to stop over harvesting it. And what that means is that it's going to reduce the income for the harvesters. So they're in a difficult situation because they have to keep harvesting more and more to survive. But at the same time, you don't want to support that. You want to find a solution. So inequality of the distribution system, the middlemen have to be cut out, basically. And what you have to do is redistribute the wealth so that the people who are taking care of the trees can do it in a way that's economically sustainable. So it's very challenging, but there are success stories, and that's I'm very happy to say that I've been able to be involved with for decades, to see that there are success stories, that it can be done. But it's a lot more than just putting some logo on your website and saying that you're doing it. It's a big change in human attitudes about life and money and lots of things, but it's a great opportunity, because really the ecological crisis is going to, or it is going to force people to reevaluate priorities.
Yeah.
And as we lose more and more of the environment and the biodiversity, and hunger increases and more and more viruses are moving through the population, then we have an increased urgency to change things and to come back into some form of harmony and relationship with the elements of the biosphere and with the plants that support our life and all of these kind of things that are really important. Out of that, there is the potential then that there can be this kind of spiritual transformation. So it is coming into the population. Business is certainly catching on to it, but I think that a lot of what's changing in business is not so much that business is actually becoming more green, sustainable, and conscious. I think that business follows trends, and it's very trendy right now. So the difficulty is that there's a certain educated population, which is in a certain socioeconomic layer of society. And those people have the knowledge and they have the resources to be able to choose things. They can pay more money for organic food. They can pay more money for organic coffee. They can pay more money for high quality botanical medicines. That's sort of limited to these socioeconomic conditions. And most people don't have that luxury to be able to buy these kind of high quality, organic, sustainable products where you get all the information about where it's coming from and who the farmer is and all that kind of thing. Most people, like here in the United States, a lot of the United States is just a total food desert, you know. It's not even, those kind of things aren't even available to the average person. And they certainly don't have the money for it. So that's what's supporting the really low quality products. And the low quality products are all linked to toxic agribusiness and these kind of things. So there's a huge socioeconomic part of it that is simply not able to have that kind of awareness or ability to actually support, this level of regenerative agriculture sustainability, unless people get excited and inspired about doing things like community gardens, and school gardens. And so it's always available. It's a solution that's always there. And that's been something that I've been very actively involved in for many years, is promoting these kind of local solutions, because when it comes to herbal medicine, which is my broader interest, not just essential oils and aromatherapy, herbal medicine, many species are endangered. Many species are extremely expensive. And one of the solutions is grow it in the backyard. And many people are. And that is definitely a very positive trend that is happening, because in a certain way, we're talking about sustainability in business. Well, that's fine. But ultimately, I think we're going to have to opt out of the whole business model. Eventually, we're going to just have to, go back to our relationships with our neighbors and having things that are more locally produced. And there are some wonderful areas in the United States where communities have done really, really well with that. But again, it's somewhat related to the prosperity level in that part of society to be able to do that. So these are complicated economic and political issues also.
There's definitely a movement over here, and I can speak on Europe, of city allotments and, as you call them, community gardens, where we're growing everything that's based on climate that can be grown in these areas, and trying to get people to go back to, especially kids, trying to teach the kids coming up that you grow your food. It doesn't come in plastic in the supermarket. It comes out of soil. And I think I can see it consistently growing, excuse the pun, more and more, especially in the inner cities, and in the inner cities where the density of population is leading to poverty. And it's where the lower income people are being encouraged to go to. But then there's a movement of community support in there to help make them more self-sufficient.
Right. Well, there are two interesting dimensions to this that I can point out from my personal experience. And one is that it's very positive that there's a tremendous humanizing process that happens when kids get into gardens. I mean, it's just a much healthier place to be. They do better with their academic scores. They get exercise and some fresh air, and they also learn about what you were talking about, that food comes from plants. I mean, I've been involved in a big community garden in Los Angeles now for over 20 years. And every year it's the same thing. The kids come out, they get in the garden, and they're amazed. You mean this is what a tomato looks like? They've never actually seen food, So there's a great humanizing experience that comes from that. And it also is a great opportunity for people to learn some social skills, because if you grow something yourself in a garden, then you develop pride of ownership. And that is something that a lot of kids don't develop. And because of that, there's very little respect of, other people's hard work or other people's space or other people's accomplishments. And so there's a very important aspect of becoming a mature human being that comes from working collectively with other gardeners and working in the garden and being in this, contact with the soil and the weather and seeing the plants grow and being involved in the whole cycle where you put the seed in the ground and then later you take something home to your family. I know that for a lot of kids, they're tremendously proud of their accomplishment when they can take their zucchini squash home to cook it, So there is something that is very positive about that side of it. But at the level that we're talking about, it's not really a solution for feeding the cities yet. It could be. But there's another aspect of this, which goes back to the broader topic I was addressing before, and that is the sustainability of plant species. And the opposite side that is happening all over the world is that young people are leaving the villages and they don't want to do this work anymore.
Yeah.
And their parents, you say the frankincense harvesting families that have done this for, generations and generations, they don't want to do that work anymore. They don't, it's hard work. Nobody, agriculture is hard work. And nobody really wants to do it unless it's a labor of love and you are doing something for your own personal reasons. But it's just brutal, really. And that's why people go to the cities. They're looking for a better life. And there's no real money in it compared to what you can get if you can figure out Bitcoin, So there's that other trend as well. And that's something that's very important when it comes to the transmission of traditional knowledge in these cultures. And this is something that I have seen firsthand, because when I went to Asia to study Tibetan medicine, I was very fortunate to have a years-long relationship with a traditional Tibetan doctor in Kathmandu, in Nepal, and with Ayurvedic doctors in Nepal and in India. And almost all of them are gone now. They were elders when I was studying with them, and they were passing on their information to me, but the younger people didn't want to study with them. Now there's a lot of young people interested in herbology, but in the villages, in the traditional cultures, people are not interested in that level of knowledge because of how much work it is and how little compensation there is. And that's another thing, that more and more people who are getting into herbal medicine have no idea how big a dedication it is. I mean, it's a 20-year project to really be trained as an herbalist. And there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to make a living because it's all paid out of pocket. Insurance doesn't pay for it. It could be. If our government was using our tax money correctly, then natural medicine could be a top priority, but that's a political issue, you see. So both of those things are there, and that's just the wonderful thing about how complicated life is that you've got opportunities for kids coming up in the cities, but at the same time in the traditional cultures, people don't even care, and so much knowledge is being lost now. Some people are going back and making some attempts at sustainability, but it's a complicated process all the way around.
I'm interested in your Tibetan medicine knowledge. So you study Tibetan medicine as well as Ayurvedic medicine?
And Chinese medicine and Western herbal medicine and allopathic medicine also.
How did all of that influence your work with essential oils? Did you always know those different disciplines of medicine would lead you working with the oils in the way you do today?
Well, my original contact, you see, my travels through the world of herbal medicine have gone in a lot of different stages. And it's put me in contact basically with herbal medicine all over the world. And so the first phase started as a teenager when I found myself on this mountaintop at night in a storm in Oaxaca, where I was at the mud hut, the home of Maria Sabina, who you might be aware of historically was a Mazatec Indian curandera who worked with the psilocybin mushroom. And she was discovered actually by Gordon Wasson in the 50s, who was a mycologist who stayed with her for a period of time and reported on her. And she became famous in the 50s because of an article in Life magazine. And because people heard about her, they started going to the mountains of Oaxaca and participating in the mushroom ceremonies. And that included the Beatles and Bob Dylan and Andrew Weil and a number of other people who went there as part of a very, very early kind of entheogenic or psychedelic revolution that was starting. And I was actually in that generation, and I met Maria Sabina, and I was greatly influenced by the experience. And so I can say that my first contact with herbal medicine was really almost like an ancestral kind of awakening in the mountains of Oaxaca with traditional entheogenic type of medicine that opened the doorway to a lot of different things. So that was actually the first phase. And then from there, the second phase went into my academic studies, because after I came back, I started looking around because I caught a glimpse that there was something else out there. And there was nothing at all available at the time in terms of natural medicine. There was, maybe a health food store here and there, but there was very, very little herbal medicine available, or knowledge or education, very little. And so I started looking around, and the next phase of my education was in San Francisco. I went into the first acupuncture college that was opened there, and graduated from there in 1984. And so the second phase of my education was training in Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and herbal medicine. But when I came out of that, I was not content with the level of education that I was getting, which of course was the first education in traditional Chinese medicine that had come to the United States. I was in the first generation of Westerners to get trained in Chinese medicine and get a license to practice. But during that period of time in San Francisco, I also came in contact with the Tibetan Buddhist community and got very interested in Tibetan medicine because of that. And because of that influence, after I had been practicing in San Francisco for a few years, I went to Nepal and I started studying Tibetan medicine and went to the roots of Chinese medicine, which is working in digging up roots in the forest with my teachers and chopping them up, purifying the minerals and things like that, and the alchemical procedures. And that was the next phase. Phase 3, I guess, would be my study in Asia. And from that, I also made a lot of contacts with Ayurvedic doctors in Nepal. And that's where I started doing the real traditional apprenticeship, internship trainings with the Ayurvedic doctors there. And this was going on the whole time I was going back and forth and running my clinic in Southern California. And so as I was getting trained in Tibetan and Ayurvedic medicine, I was also incorporating that into my practice of Chinese medicine. And that's where the essential oils showed up in that period of time. So I started incorporating aromatherapy into those treatments. And then the next phase, I guess, was when I started touring in India, studying with my mentor of aromatics in India for years. And, like that, a step at a time. So all of these different journeys, happened sequentially and one step at a time. I went to these different places and met these different people and brought the information back. And Floracopeia started somewhere along the line, and these community gardens started coming up somewhere along the line, and that's how it happened. Oh yeah, and there was a book in there also.
Of course, it's such a complementary journey. Like all of them coming together, they would just feel so guided by, a wiser power than us. But it just feels like to combine so many different, as you call them, sacred plants, and these, old, non-Western, old, beautiful medical experiences and skill sets is so unique. I have never met anyone that has combined so many in such a useful way. And now to talk about things like sustainability and these community gardens and trying to bring us all back to basics again is it feels like a beautiful journey you've taken so far.
Well, thank you for that acknowledgement and feedback. And I'll also say that a lot of the medical training that I got was from battling parasites and respiratory infections in Asia and all of these kind of things. So there was a lot. I paid a fairly high price for a lot of this knowledge in terms of my physical health, because in those days it was not like you just go online and take a course. And there's nothing wrong with online education. I'm glad that it's exploding. I'm doing it all the time myself.
Yeah.
It's actually way more comfortable and easier to do that. But at the same time, you don't have the richness and the depth of so many educational experiences. And I would say that there is simply no way that you can substitute online education or even just, weekend seminars or things like that. There's no way that you can duplicate that for the experience of working with a traditional elder in the environment that they live for an extended period of time. And that's how classical medicine was always done. Now basically anybody can be an herbalist, and the success of being an herbalist, it's not regulated in the United States. And same with essential oils, anybody can be an aromatherapist, anybody can be an herbalist. And that means that your degree of fame and renowned has nothing to do with how much education you've received or how much clinical experience you have or how effective you are as a practitioner or dangerous as a practitioner. All it has to do with is how many Instagram followers you have. And so anybody can be a famous herbalist now, you see. But that doesn't actually mean that you know what you're doing. Okay. And so what we have to do then is we have to take the modern conveniences of having access to all of this information everywhere and having access to the herbs from all over the world also. It is a golden age in terms of herbal medicine. All of the herbs from everywhere are available to us now, and all the teachings, and everybody's now is offering online education in every medical tradition, and it's all available. But we have to embody that. And what that means is at a certain point, book learning, online learning, academic intellectual learning only goes so far. And we should only study it to the point where we're not going to hurt ourselves or others. And then we should develop an intimate biological relationship with the intelligence of that plant. So that's really the most important priority that I'm focused on at this point is really telling people, look, herbal medicine is a sacred endeavor. Is using the prana, the life force of the plant, to support our life force. And if we look at herbal medicine at that particular level, then all of a sudden life is a sacred process of energies and elements, and it's the sunlight that's combusting inside the body, and the moonlight that's controlling the fluids and hydrating us, and our breath is connected to the plants, and the plants the oxygen, and suddenly we're in this cosmological relationship with everything. And that's really what herbal medicine is about now at this particular time, because if we're just using herbal medicine symptomatically, which a lot of people are, it's just like, oh, grab the turmeric product and take it.
Yep.
But that doesn't give us any relationship with the plant, and it doesn't give us any relationship to nature through the plant. And so if we want for there to be a future life for humanity in this biosphere, then we're going to have a sacred relationship with the biosphere. And the most immediate way to do that is through the plants, because we put the plants in our mouth every day, and with the water that we drink and with the air that we breathe. And so herbal medicine is the doorway then into the ecological spirituality of understanding our biological unity. And we look at herbal medicine as that opportunity. It goes way beyond whether this company is sustainably supporting the production of that turmeric or not. It's much, much deeper collective spiritual potential that's there. So that's what I'm focused on. And that's because through those studies, and for whatever reason, whatever destiny or good fortune I had, that I was able to go and meet these different teachers in these different traditions. What it's come down to now is that those elders are gone. They gave me something valuable. I have contemplated it deeply, meditated on it deeply, studied it inwardly, internally, very deeply, taught about it, practiced it clinically for decades. And now I have something to say about it. And what I have to say about it is influenced by and guided by the things that I was taught. And so really what I'm teaching now in my own practice and my clinical practice as well, which continues, I have telemedicine clinical practice. What I'm teaching now is really the synthesis that is, I think the best way to describe it, the best term that I use, is the inner spiritual dimensions of classical Asian medicine. Because classical Asian medicine is based on cosmology. It's yin and yang, which in Ayurveda is sunlight and moonlight. And then if we look at all the implications of that and the whole cosmology, the terminology of prana and chi and life force and the five elements, the pancha mahabhutas, earth, water, fire, air, space. If we just go into that cosmology, what we see is that that's the basis of diagnosis and treatment, but that's also the basis of the spiritual lineages. And so we see that originally Chinese medicine was inherently Taoist by nature, which includes Qigong and internal alchemy. And it was also linked very much to Buddhist practices and cosmology. And in Ayurveda, it's linked to the Vedas and to Tantra. And so all of the medical lineages actually have internal spiritual dimensions. And originally they were all woven together, you see. So the use of plants was not an allopathic, reductionistic type of thing. It was a sacred thing, and it was part of spiritual practices. There was an ultimate purpose in using plant medicine, and that was to support our spiritual evolution and growth. And that's now what I think is most important, is that these lineages, classical Asian medicine, has come to the West in the form of acupuncture, in the form of, trendy herbal products, and Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine or panchakarma, these types of things, luxury spa treatments, these kind of things. But it's very much out of context. The way that these things used to be used was inseparable from meditation practice and ceremony and ritual and contemplative practices. And so this is the doorway, the opportunity that we have is to really bring back the sacredness, the reverence, the spiritual dimensions to plant medicine by understanding the deeper spiritual dimensions of these classical medical systems.
Mm-hmm.
That's really my focus now. That's where all of this journey and all of those parasitic infections brought me to. So.
It's incredible. I love it. One of my questions to you, but you've answered it, was, where's your attention going in the future, and where do you think it's most important to put our energy in the future? But you answered it beautifully. It sounds like you're incredibly focused on what you're doing, which is very inspiring as well.
Well, I have just launched, some of your listeners may be aware of the Shift Network. And
yes.
I have 3 businesses. One is Floracopeia, the essential oil business. And I have done a lot of teaching events for years and years, traveling all over with live events. And it was before the pandemic. The pandemic put a stop to all of that. I'm still doing a lot of education through Floracopeia. We've launched a lot of courses, and we're always bringing new oils in, and we're always working with new distillers.
Yep.
Over the last year, we've been working with a gentleman in Bhutan, and we've released some Aromatic Treasures, first time distillation of some oils from the Himalayas. So that's ongoing, and that's a wonderful aspect of work. I really like
Very
that
exciting
connection. I like that connection to the global community of people who are taking care of plants and being able to sell their products for them. And then I have my telemedicine consultations, and then I have my teaching career over at the Shift Network, and I've been a faculty member there now for about 8 years, and have taught something like 20 courses for them. And the big focus for me right now is that we have just launched a year-long certification program, which is titled Illuminated Herbalism, Illuminated Herbology. And it's illuminated herbalism for 2 different reasons. That has 2 different meanings. One is that we're going to be spending the year using herbal medicine to cultivate and deepen and strengthen our spiritual practices. And the other is that we're going to be using herbal medicine. We're going to be using spiritual practices, our meditation and contemplative practices and Qigong practices, to deepen our relationship with herbal medicine. And this is a very interesting subject, because what we're talking about is the way that the body and mind operate together, and then the way that the body and mind operate in relation to plants. So what we know is that the more relaxed we are and the more mindful we are, the more powerfully we experience things. More directly we experience things. And it also happens that there's many physiological mechanisms where the more deeply focused we are at a spiritual, meditative, contemplative level, that the more it potentizes the effects of the plants inside of us. So we know that meditation practice, that prayer, affirmations, visualizations, the effect of the mind has tremendous healing potential for the body, and vice versa. But what I'm bringing out now more is that if we consciously use the body-mind relationship, that it can deepen our relationship with herbal medicine, and herbal medicine can deepen our relationship with the body-mind relationship. So that's what illuminated herbalism refers to. And so 50% of that program is a classic kind of herbal training that includes essential oils and how to use plants for a wide variety of conditions. And 50% of it is the spiritual traditions and practices, and how do we bring those kinds of things back together again. So that's what I'll be doing this year.
When does it start, David?
It starts next week on February 17.
Oh, very good. Okay, brilliant.
Yeah, every week.
All online.
It's all online. Every week for a year. And there's
Very good.
a lot of practices, meditative practices, and also a lot of using herbs. One of the things that I learned in the early stages of developing this program, I did some research to find out how many herb schools are there in the United States that are offering certification programs in being an herbalist. I found out there are 80 herb schools that are offering certifications. And from the marketing standpoint, that's bad news. There's so many certification programs that are out there. But what I found was the good news is that everybody's offering virtually the same thing. Yeah. And so what I was really wanting to do was, first of all, to raise the standards of education so that it's not just the same thing. But I also really wanted to bring out this deeper relationship with the plant spiritually, reintegrate these traditions that used to be more integrated. But I also wanted to change a few of the misconceptions that come with people getting certifications. Now, one of the main reasons that people go for certifications to become an herbalist or an acupuncturist, to get an acupuncture license, or a naturopath, one of the main motivations is, of course, that people want to have a career and they want to make a living at it. But when they get into the training, especially if it is shorter periods of time, like say you take a few weekend online courses during the year and you get a certification. Well, people don't realize that that's not really enough to do anything with, okay? And it's not only insufficient as far as being able to help other people, it's insufficient in terms of being able to make a living. Now, if you've got hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers and you can take a weekend course and call yourself an herbalist and make millions of dollars, okay? But most people don't do it that way. Most people are actually thinking in terms of, I'd like to have a telemedicine, I'd like to have a little apothecary, I'd like to make some products like that. But people don't realize what a commitment this is. Because realistically, if you want to make a living being an herbalist, then you have to work really hard for a really long time. And you've got to be really educated about a lot of really complicated things with medicine. And the reason for that is because even though herbal medicine is relatively safe and effective, if you start putting yourself out as a clinician, people are going to come to you because they have complicated conditions that allopathic medicine hasn't been able to address. And so it's not like you're going to be giving people simple remedies like chamomile tea for simple conditions like your bellyache. But because of that, but really what you're going to be dealing with is chemotherapy and side effects of radiation. And you're going to be dealing with herb-drug interactions and serious commitment to understanding not just herbal medicine, but you really need to have some of the conceptual training in Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine to know what each of those systems offer that is the strongest. Ayurvedic medicine is stronger than Chinese medicine in some ways. And Western herbology is stronger than Chinese medicine in some ways. And we need to understand the best systems, the best of each system. And we also have to have a pretty in-depth understanding of basic things about the body. And I will say at this point that even naturopathic doctors, even functional medical doctors are really missing the point repeatedly when it comes to diagnosis and treatment, because natural medicine is full of a lot of trendy things. And there's a lot of wastebasket diagnoses that are out there, heavy metal poisoning and SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth and parasites and all these things, they're just wastebasket diagnoses. And they are actual, true medical problems when they are. But a lot of times it just is that practitioners are confronted with conditions that are so complex that they don't know where to go.
They're not easily defined.
Is it Lyme, or is it rheumatoid arthritis, or is it rheumatoid arthritis triggered by Lyme? I mean, this is what is happening in the population now. So this is why it's very important to take this seriously.
Yeah.
And the reason that I say that is because I have many people that come to me after they have been told things, after they've been hurt by herbal medicine. And a lot of it is because it's very trendy. They come and their blood sugar's been a little bit high, and some naturopath told them to take berberine, and they had irritable bowel syndrome, and the berberine totally flared up their irritable bowels. I mean, there's really fundamental things that are being overlooked, even in natural medicine now. So we have internet medicine, which is a great blessing and a great curse. And it's given us all of this access to all this information, but it's also brought all these products and all the marketing hype with it, and all these trendy kinds of diagnoses and treatments. So it really is something that requires a high level of dedication to really study it and understand it at a much deeper level. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't study your biology. You should just keep it in context at the best way to approach it. And this will complete my thought that I started so long ago here. And that is that rather than tell people that this herbal certification is going to make them an herbalist, that they can go out and treat other people, community herbalist or clinical herbalist or whatever these different terms are that people are using now, what I am saying is this is going to give you a high level of understanding about clinical level self-care. And this is where natural medicine, this is where medicine itself is going now, is that the patients are becoming more educated. They are going into the clinic and they're saying, these are my alternatives to what you are proposing, that I take statins. These are the things that I will do. These are the things I am doing. This is the kind of results that I'm getting. And that will put the doctor at ease. If you're doing something, you're helping yourself. So clinical level self-care is the future. Yeah. Because the medical system's breaking down and everybody's being forced to take a higher level of responsibility for themselves. And my feeling about it, my orientation to this, my observation about it, is that if you have a high level of knowledge about how to use herbal medicine to take care of yourself, and you have actually cured something in yourself, you are empowered, license or not, to help other people with that condition. Yeah. So that's how I'm approaching it.
I like that. I do agree. I think the level of curiosity now is just people are taking it into their own hands. But I like how you talk about being educated and empowered from a self-care point of view, as opposed to thinking that you can treat people. That clinical piece is very important and certainly missed a lot in the world of aromatherapy.
Well, it's especially important with essential oils because essential oils have come into popular culture in the United States, specifically through multi-level marketing companies. And essential oils combine well with everything. They combine well with massage, they combine well with meditation, they combine well with yoga, they combine with acupuncture, they combine well with everything, but they do not combine well with multi-level marketing. And the reason for that is because multi-level marketing is based on a premise. That is that you want to make money. And that means that you want to sell. Well, essential oils are the most concentrated form of botanical medicine. And the more concentrated the form of botanical medicine becomes, the higher the level of knowledge is required to use them safely. And so here in the United States, we have an epidemic of poisoning cases and adverse reactions. Databases full of thousands of these cases coming out every year. Okay. People burning themselves, putting them on their kids undiluted, ingesting it internally, causing themselves permanent esophageal damage. And all of this is because it's driven by consume it. I mean, how would it be if doctors were selling, antidepressants in a multi-level marketing scheme? Well, maybe they are actually, but with essential oils, what it ends up doing is that you just try to find all of these ways to encourage people to ingest them. And that's not how you do herbal medicine.
No.
You do it carefully. You don't just tell people, drink a whole bunch of lemon oil or water every day.
You don't need to for them to be effective.
What's that?
You don't need to for them to be effective, regardless of the safety issues. They're, as you say, immensely concentrated. They're very effective in minute doses.
Exactly. Well, in a lot of cases, the risk and benefit ratio of using essential oils doesn't make any sense. It's better just to use the whole plant. But there are some things that essential oils are really, really good at. And this has to do with where do the plant medicines come in contact with the body. So herbal medicine ingested orally is a highly effective treatment for digestive problems. And why is that? Because the herbs come in contact with the mucous membrane of the GI tract. So they work directly on the GI tract. All right. So essential oils are highly effective in aromatherapy for the respiratory system. Why? Because we're breathing it in. They come in direct contact with the sinus mucous membranes in the respiratory system. And we know that it's highly effective for stress because of the olfactory limbic link. You see, these oils and olfaction go directly to the brain. So if we understand the strengths and weaknesses of different applications of different categories of herbs, then we can use the herbal medicine in the right way. So there are many things that essential oils cannot do for the body. They cannot give hydration. They cannot give nutrition. They cannot give us adaptogenic compounds. So we can take herbs that do that. And then we can use the essential oils to complement those herbs, or vice versa. We use the essential oils in aromatherapy as a primary treatment, maybe for dispersing phlegm from the lungs. But then we can take some mucolytic herbs to facilitate that process even more. So the future of essential oils is actually the integration of essential oils and herbal medicine together. You see, that's something that's very interesting that is happening, that I've been actively working on now for quite a while. And that is to understand that essential oils are not a complete medical system. Aromatherapy is not a complete medical system. It is an adjunct medical system. And if you bring it into herbal medicine as a broader category, then it gives you a greater pharmacy that's going to be much more effective. So we look at herbal medicine and we say, well, is it best to take the herbs as a water infusion, as tea, or is it best to get a tincture, or is it best to take it as powder, or is it best to even take it orally at all? Maybe it's best to take a bath, or maybe it's best to use medicated oils. So we look at all the different applications of the herbal medicine according to the different categories therapeutically that we want to accomplish. And we see that essential oils are there. They have very strong antimicrobial powers. They have very strong effects on the limbic system, and they come in contact directly with the skin. And if we know how to do all of that correctly, then we can integrate them into herbal medicine as a broader strategy, and herbal medicine becomes much more effective.
Amazing, David. David, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. This has been fascinating to dive inside your brain and see what's going on in there. Thank you so much for sharing what you do, but also thank you so much for the work you do. It is incredibly fortuitive and insightful what you do. So thank you for doing it and sharing it with me and the audience today.
Well, thank you, Colleen, for the good work that you're doing and for inviting me. And thank you to everybody who's listening in for your interest in this important subject.
Yeah. We'll provide links, David, so people can reach out if they have questions or to support what you're doing. So it's all going to be in episode notes. So for the guys that are listening, you can grab more information on David in there. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Take care. I hope you found this week's conversation fascinating. I was completely enthralled in this conversation, and David is such a wealth of knowledge, but he has such a beautiful way of relaying his thoughts, philosophies and experiences. It was a beautiful interview. If you feel like this is useful or insightful to friends and family or colleagues and acquaintances, don't hesitate to share this week's episode with David. And you can also rate and review the LabAroma podcast over on iTunes, Spotify or Google Podcast. Until the next time, take care and don't hesitate to spread the word of plant medicine.